Hi, Sai, Karate Illuminati. This is Noah, and today we're going to be taking a look at a collection of Ippon Kumite drills, also known as one-step sparring drills, and breaking down the issues that these drills have when it comes to realism, practicality, and skill building. Now, I am aware that this can be a fairly sensitive topic for some people. There are many karateka who have spent decades training drills like these, and it is easy to feel like criticism of these drills is criticism of yourself personally and your entire martial arts practice, but that is not my intention. I simply feel that we should be honest with ourselves with regard to the practicality and effectiveness of the drills that we use and the training methods that we incorporate into our karate. So, all that said, we are going to be taking a look at a set of drills from the SKIF, that is the Shotokan Karate-Do International Federation, founded by Kanazawa Hirokazu, one of the foremost figures in Shotokan Karate. Right off the bat, from the very first drill, we are going to see a number of flaws which are going to come up again and again and again as we go through this series of drills. To begin with, they are starting at a distance that is too far apart for them to reach each other. So before anything has even happened, they are farther than arm's reach away from each other. And we know that the vast majority of self-defense scenarios happen within arm's reach. Now, you can kind of forgive this from a sport fighting context because very often sport fighting starts farther away. But then we have this stepping back from the attacker and setting up with this get-on-barai posture, this very formalized preparatory position. They have stepped even farther away from the person that they are going to attack, which is not how attacks work. They're certainly not going to do some sort of formal, low sweeping arm position or ki to let you know that they're going to be attacking. Then he has to step across the massive gap that he has created, and the defender is going to step back. Now, right away, he doesn't need to do anything else. They started too far apart to reach each other. Then the attacker stepped further away. And then the attacker steps in with an attack coming from here for no reason, in a perfectly straight line. That is not what real life punches look like when they're coming in. And you're certainly not going to learn the timing to deal with them from a punch coming in at that distance from that trajectory. So it isn't a realistic attack to be dealing with in the first place. But stepping back away from it means that nothing else needs to happen because it will not reach the target. And you can see that once the punch finishes, the defender didn't need to block it because it was not going to land anyway. But despite that, we see Jodan-uke, the high-level receiver, being used to block a punch that wasn't going to land. And not only that, they're using their other hand to pull back to a hikite, pulling hand chamber, for no reason. There's absolutely no reason to have that hand there. And they've stepped back into a really long zenkutsudachi, front stance, also for no reason. There is no combative reason that they needed to use that stance. They could have just taken a small step back and they'd have been fine. They wouldn't have even needed to get into a stance, to be honest. Then, to finish off the drill, the defender throws a punch. Now, this block punch sequencing is going to happen a lot as we go through these. And from a tactical perspective, that is also bad timing because you are essentially fighting on a rhythm that is already behind, right? Your attacker has initiated the first technique. Then you blocked it. If we are taking this in turns, you're getting punched again. So you might throw that punch and it might land, but chances are your attacker is already throwing another punch at you by the time your punch is on the way. So from the very beginning, we have a distance that is too far apart, which means that the timing is unrealistic. We have an incoming attack from an unrealistic position, across an unrealistic trajectory that, again, is too far away to actually land. So you're not seeing something that you're ever going to see in real life. You have the defender stepping away from the attack, so they don't actually need to do anything else. And yet they then execute a child's application for a technique, a basic high block application that doesn't need to happen. They're not using their hikite for anything, and they're not using their stance for anything. That is quite a lot of issues just from one drill. And we are going to see this type of thing repeated over and over. The next drill starts the same way. They are too far apart. The bad guy steps away to make it even farther apart, gets into a position that's unrealistic, and they then step across that massive gap with a sterilized children's karate punch that is in no way realistic, and the defender steps away from it, so again, they don't need to block it. It will not hit them. In this case, it is even less likely to hit them, because in the first drill, they stepped straight back. And you could at least make the argument that it's difficult to judge how far back you need to step from something to be out of reach. But in this drill, they're stepping off at an angle, which means that it misses on two planes, right? You are not just stepping back away from the incoming attack, you are stepping offline entirely. So there is no chance this punch lands. But he blocks it anyway. So he has a front hand blocking a technique that isn't going to be a threat. Absolutely no reason to block it. And at the same time, he has his other hand held back behind his face for no reason. And I say for no reason because the reason is setting up for the strike that comes next. But all that does is continue to put you on a rhythm that is behind your attacker. The attack came in, you blocked it, another attack is coming. So by doing this setup and then throwing that shuto across, all you are doing is setting yourself behind. The opponent is going to be hitting you before you're hitting them. And of course, the use of stances, completely irrelevant. Hikite, completely unused. This next drill, of course, starts with the exact same problems as the other ones. Too far apart, unrealistic starting position, unrealistic attack. They're stepping out of the way, so there's no need to block that incoming attack. Not using the hikite for anything. But one thing that I will say for this drill in particular is that they are actually using a counter strike off of that initial attack that is appropriate for the range. They have stepped to a distance where kicking is appropriate. But then they choose to transition from a long-range technique to a close-range technique by throwing an elbow strike. And that elbow is to the body, which is a suboptimal target for elbow strikes. It's not to say that it's necessarily never going to be effective, but an elbow to the head is always going to be more effective than an elbow to the body. And again, there's no use of the hikite while throwing this elbow, and the timing on these counterattacks really means you are going to be getting punched again. Because again, after that initial block, before you've really even had a chance to land that kick, they're going to be trying to hit you again. And even if you land that kick before them, there's a pretty good chance they're going to hit you yet again before you land that elbow, because you are trying to cover so much distance. You are going from long range to close range immediately. It would be more efficient if you went from long range to middle range, something like punching. But the choice to cover that distance, I understand, kind of stems from Shotokan's inspiration taken from sword arts, right? And the distance that you then see in Kumite with point fighting. You want to have that long range that you need to cover because you don't want them to hit you when you're hitting them. Now we're starting to get a little fancy, right? We have a Jujiuke showing up. Again, to block a technique that was not going to land in the first place. Stepping back was enough. So blocking it like that, completely unnecessary. The only reason to have blocked it at all is because right after that they do grab the punch. But the thing is, grabbing punches out of the air is not realistic. There are times where you can take an incoming punch and use it against the opponent, but a straight punch, highly unlikely. Straight punches generally get pulled back pretty quickly, even from untrained people, right? Haymakers are one thing. Fully committed big swings are easier to take advantage of. But we're looking at straight punches in these drills, which again are not realistic straight punches, but this issue of holding the punch out that we've been seeing really is highlighted in this drill, because now we are actively capitalizing on the fact that that punch is being left out there in the middle of nowhere. The kick is fine, right? If you can grab somebody's arm and pull them into a kick, that's fine. But then deciding to turn your back on them to close the distance, just like the last drill, going from long range where you're kicking to close range for an elbow to the body, just doesn't make much sense. This drill, again, a lot of the same issues, but we also see that in order to transition from the distance that he stepped back to block, he has to do a little shuffle step so that he can even reach the opponent with a kick and then use that kick to also step in and throw an elbow strike. This is still just trying to cover a massive amount of distance when you've already set yourself back to a long range. It doesn't make sense tactically. What I will give them credit for, though, is at least it appears he is using Hikite to pull that opponent's arm as he steps in for that elbow. And that is the first time, and I think it might be the only time in this set of drills, where Hikite is actually used that way. This next drill, nothing special. It's the exact same issues as the very first one, just using a different block. This one is apparently trying to teach you to transition your hand from blocking something to striking, which is something that Motobu Choki said you needed to be able to do. The defending hand needs to be able to become the attacking hand in an instant. That's not necessarily a bad thing. All things considered, this is probably one of the better drills in this set. But of course, we still see incorrect distancing, incorrect timing, stances that mean nothing, Hikite not in use. This drill seems to somewhat build on the last one. We have, again, all the same issues, but from that basic children's application middle block, we're turning that block into a counter punch and then following it up with another punch. Not terrible, but again, all the same issues of distancing, timing, and impractical techniques. And again, we have Hikite not being used, stances being used for no apparent reason. And you can even tell that they are so far away that the counter punches can't even reach. This one is particularly bad in its children's application. Very much like the second drill that we saw, there's this stepping off to an angle, so there is absolutely no danger of that punch ever landing, and yet still blocking it for no apparent reason. But it is at an appropriate distance to throw the kick that comes next, and then there is the spear hand to the chest. This, to somebody, is not going to work. And honestly, even people who have conditioned their fingertips extensively to strike with the fingertips very rarely do it like this, because it's just not an efficient and effective way to attack someone with your fingertips. This is an application that is constantly taught that is totally impractical. Here we see what is probably something inspired by Pinan Sandan, or in this case Heian Sandan. We have that elbow wing as a block, which is fine, but again, we're not using our other hand. That Hikite has no purpose. The stance has no purpose. And then we are voluntarily turning our back on the opponent to land this spinning elbow. Much, much better choices are available. this just doesn't make sense tactically. Now, this has been about half of the drills that are in this original instructional video from Kanazawa, and I'm not going to bore you with the rest of them because it is essentially just more of the same. It is all of these repeated issues of improper distancing, which causes improper timing. And that improper timing is reinforced by the fact that the attacks are completely unrealistic. And so you have way too much time to respond to them, and they don't look like a real attack. So you are not in any way training yourself to respond to real attacks. We have this odd timing of blocking and then counterattacking, which is going to get you knocked out more often than not. We have children's applications when there are much more practical and effective ways to use those same movements and postures. We have stances that are not being used for anything. We have hikite not being used for anything. There are just so many issues with these drills that there is no real redeeming quality to them. This is a discussion that I've been having with other karateka for many years, and I have yet to have anyone provide an example of a benefit that these drills provide that cannot be provided better through more practical drills and in ways that do not develop the same bad habits that these drills develop. The issue is that most people are susceptible to what's called the sunk cost fallacy. Basically, when you spend a lot of time doing something, you will make all kinds of excuses for the value of that thing, because to admit that what you were doing was not worthwhile is personally hurtful. People don't want to feel like they've wasted their time, and I understand that. And for a lot of people, these are required material. They were required for me for quite some time. And when that's the case, you do need to try to find ways to milk any bit of use out of them that you can, because otherwise, again, it is a waste of time. My late sensei did not like these types of drills, but we did have them in our organization and they were required. And so he tried to find ways to make them as useful as possible. We made sure that we closed the timing and distancing up to be more realistic. We made sure that we were hitting pretty hard so that we could at least get some body conditioning out of them. We practiced alternative finishes so that we would end the drills sooner and in different ways that would be more realistic. We did alternate endings where we would do the entirety of the drill, but instead of just doing the normal finishing move, we would do something else that, again, was more realistic. He also broke them down to be just the ending techniques and being done against realistic attacks. So we were able to sort of connect this impractical thing to a more practical version of it. And he did this because he wanted us to get something out of the drills, even though he was well aware of the fact that they were not good for us from a practical perspective. It was teaching people to do things from far away. It was teaching them to block things they didn't need to block. It was teaching them to use their techniques in ways that are unrealistic and not very effective. There were just a lot of issues with it, but we knew we had to do them. And I know that by speaking on this, I'm going to upset a lot of people from my former organization as well. That happens every time I bring this up. But I still feel that this is an important subject and that we need to be honest with ourselves when it comes to the way we train. It is very evident that these types of drills cause more harm to a student's development than good. And we can replace them with drills that are more practical. All you have to do is make sure that everyone is at the right distance for a realistic attack. Make the attack they have to defend against realistic. There are statistics on what the most common attacks are that we need to deal with. Use that. Defend against those attacks with realistic, effective responses. And that is going to mean that your timing needs to interrupt your opponent. You can't do block counter because you will be hit, right? Make sure that if you're using a stance, it's actually facilitating the technique that you're doing. Otherwise, there's no reason to be doing it. And if you're going to be using hikite, it should be pulling some part of the opponent. These are pretty easy changes to make to a very simple ideology when it comes to a training method, because all the idea of Ippon Kumite is an attack and response. That's how pretty much all martial arts teach things. An attack comes at you and you respond to it. Sure, there's times where you are purely the aggressor and you need to be on the offensive and taking the initiative. But most martial arts start people with defenses and counters. The idea of doing that is fine. The idea of a one-step, of an Ippon Kumite drill is fine. It's the execution in these overly formalized, overly sterilized, kendo-inspired drills that's the issue. Defenders of these drills will say that they teach you distancing, but again, we've shown the distancing is wrong. They'll say that it teaches timing. The timing is wrong. They'll say that it teaches you your basics. Sure, but it teaches you to use them incorrectly, and you learn those basics without needing to use these drills. You can learn those basics in your kata and actually learn how to use them appropriately. They'll say that it teaches you to be confident when being faced with an attack, but again, these attacks don't look anything like real life. It's a false sense of security that you're developing. They'll say that they develop your athleticism and explosiveness, but there are much better ways to train that than these kind of drills that won't also build all the bad habits that these drills will build.